Hey world, it's La-Donna and Mark here.
Say that again, please. I wasn't looking. I wasn't ready.
Okay.
Am I overglossed?
No, just the correct amount of gloss.
I just literally one more time.
Hey world, it's La-Donna and Mark here from Radique Audio.
Wasn't it Mark and La-Donna?
I switched it up.
You love to just write my name at the end of emails and pretend to people that you're me.
Would you like me to do it again?
I'd like to be sitting in that chair, but you told me that that was a less than flattering angle for me, so I'm reluctantly sitting in this chair again today. I don't know why you're acting like that's not what happened.
Okay, all right.
We have new microphones, and that's really what this video is about, is testing the microphones.
Thank you to Hollyland for
Are they paying us?
building these microphones that we really like so far. No, we're not being sponsored by Hollyland.
They are cool because they're magnetic.
They're magnetic.
that's
They seem to have good sound quality. They've got noise cancellation, active noise cancellation, and a very good range. So hopefully the audio from this recording will be our best so far.
Yeah, and we've had some spotty audio.
Some spotty audio for sure. And we also have a spiffy new sign here, backdrop.
It's made of glass, and if it falls, it's going to shatter. So make sure not to drop it.
It's made of acrylic, but it is fragile, so we have to try to be careful. You will see a lot of drama if it starts to fall, but hopefully that will not happen today.
I'm not paying attention to this sign. This sign is your responsibility.
Okay. So this past Saturday, I was working on my own and had a number of customers come in, and we're going to be discussing today one of those interactions. So shout out to Chris. Chris was great. He's a heavy metal fan, and he was in looking for some bookshelf speakers to replace some floor standers that he no longer had room for. So he had a budget in mind and was looking for something that could handle lots of bass and pretty high volumes, because when he's got his place to himself, he enjoys to rock out at high volumes, as I do as well. Not that I get to be by myself very often, but I do enjoy.
Would you like to be by yourself more?
Sometimes I would like to. So we did a shootout with 5 sets of speakers, and we're going to be discussing that shootout with you now.
Shootout or showdown, whatever you like. I like showdown.
So I'm going to be passing the torch to La-Donna to conduct this episode kind of interview style. So La-Donna, it is all yours.
Why are you being so formal? I was just going to ask you how it went on Saturday. You listened to like 5 or 6 pairs of speakers.
It was
You
5
compared
pairs.
them? Yeah.
Yes. Someday we're hoping to do some live showdowns on camera with you guys, because it's one of my favorite things to do here.
Oh, we could test each other to see, do you know what speaker this is? We can say these are the 5 speakers, and then you can try to pick the ones that are the speaker.
Yes, I think that would be good. It's really, I know it's geeky, but I really enjoy it. I enjoy listening for those little subtle differences between speakers, or not so subtle as the case may be.
So you were with Chris?
Yes.
And what were the towers that he was downsizing from? Like, what was he trying to replace?
He was moving from some vintage floor standing Sonys. I think they were the SS967s, and nice speakers,
Were
lots
they
of
3
bass.
ways, 2 ways?
There were 3 ways.
Okay, so
Maybe,
that's a lot to ask for
Yeah.
a bookshelf speaker to replicate.
and I think he was aware that it wouldn't be possible to have quite as much bass coming from, modest sized bookshelf
Yeah.
speakers as those floor standers, but he wanted to try to come as close as possible, which is understandable.
Okay, so where did you start?
So the first pair that we tried were Cerwin-Vegas, the VS speakers.
Okay, I really like Cerwin-Vega.
Yeah, and I knew just from past experience that this particular pair is quite efficient, so that means they can play quite loudly without taxing the amplifier, and they have a pretty good bass response for their size.
What size?
About this tall. So he was able to handle some large bookshelf speakers in his space. He had the exact measurements with him, so that was handy.
Nice.
And they were the first pair we tried. And I have to say, right off the bat, I thought they sounded really good for his application.
Okay.
They were very loud. We set a bass line on our demo amp. We were using, we have a vintage JVC we use that can drive almost every pair of speakers we ever come across, from 2 ohms all the way up to 16 ohms.
Relatively vintage. It's not vintage. Like
Yeah,
our
it's
Pioneers.
late 80s,
Yeah.
a late 80s vintage JVC, but it does a great job for our demos downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the Cerwin-Vegas right off the bat, I thought they did a good job, and I think he was quite impressed with them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Great bass extension for that size of speaker, and as I said, they could play at really good
Were
volumes.
you guys listening to rock music?
It's a good question. We started off with our go-to of Gregory Charles. For those of you not familiar with Gregory Charles, he's a great vocalist from Quebec, very talented. And we like to use his music because it's got quite a big vocal range, wide range of frequency, and very clearly articulated. So it helps you compare speakers to hear some of the details in the voice. But yes, that was not an ideal choice for Chris. So we switched over to, I didn't have any heavy metal at that moment, but we set up 3 Doors Down Kryptonite, which was at least...
Wait a minute. This wasn't, I was here for that because I remember listening to that song over and over again. And I remember you left that CD in the CD player when I went to go do some testing, and that was a CD that was in there. I don't think this was Saturday. Was this Friday? Because I think I was here for this.
That's quite possible. Well, why weren't you helping me with all of the difficult transitions?
I didn't know you'd be comparing 5 different speakers. And I probably did offer
I really
to help.
thought you weren't...
And I brought up those speakers. Because when you guys came up, I remember talking to him like, oh, you guys are listening to good music.
This is all very surprising, but it does kind of make sense.
You would just love it if I wasn't here so that you could say what a hard day you had. I was here.
I wasn't saying it was a hard day. It was actually really fun during the showdown.
He didn't say yet that it was a hard day. But if you had needed help, I was a text away.
Well, thank you for that retroactive offer for help.
Because, wow. I brought up the speakers. I distinctly remember this. Yeah, I brought them up.
So you remember which ones he bought? Don't say yet, because we don't want to spoil the surprise.
I 100% was here.
Okay.
He had a nice beard, and I remember you saying,
he did. You're right. Okay.
Thank you.
This was Friday, not Saturday. I take all the Saturday references back. She did help bring speakers up, the ones that Chris wound up purchasing at the end. So, spoiler, Chris wound up leaving here with some very nice sounding speakers.
Of course he did. Okay, so you started with the Cerwin-Vegas. They were a good bass line. You switched over to 3 Doors Down. I love their music. There's a couple of really good songs that I really like a lot.
Kryptonite, even though it's definitely not metal, but it's getting into some harder rock, and it's got good bass line and faster tempo and more compression. I think it was a decent proxy.
And it's really well known.
Yeah, so that was good. We're both obviously very familiar with it.
So then where did you go from there?
So next, we tried another pair of made in the USA speakers, the JBL.
Cerwin-Vega's made in the USA?
Yes.
Did I know that? Okay.
Yes, the JBL N28s, Northridge series. So they were kind of similar in size and shape to the Cerwin-Vegas, and I knew that they were also relatively efficient from their specs, but I think we quickly ruled them out. While they were decent, and in a vacuum they would have sounded fine, back to back with those Cerwin-Vegas, they definitely sounded like a pale imitation. Now, to be fair, I think the Cerwin-Vega cabinet volume is slightly larger. The JBLs were...
They're deeper for sure.
Yes. The JBLs were nearly as efficient, but the bass response was definitely, I would say, at least one step down. And more importantly, the sound was a little muddier. Not that the Cerwin-Vegas were super articulate and clear, but they definitely had a cleaner sound than that particular pair of JBLs.
I can see that.
So that was our second pair, and we both were kind of on the same page pretty quickly.
You immediately eliminated them.
Yes, we did.
Cool. So where'd you go from there?
So from there, we moved over to a made in Canada pair of Tannoys. For those of you that don't know, Tannoy is a really well-regarded brand that started in Scotland, still UK based. And back in I'm thinking it was the late 80s, early 90s, Tannoy had some speakers built in Canada, as Canada was a lower cost option than building them in the UK. Now, unfortunately, speaker production for lower end Tannoys have moved further away, so Asia and Mexico, I think, for certain models. This pair is made in Canada. The C8s, similar in size to the JBLs and the Cerwin-Vegas that we played. And I think right away, they sounded quite a bit better than the JBL N28s. Bass response was nearly as good as those Cerwin-Vegas. I think very, very close, and much more accurate than the JBLs had been. But they still weren't quite as efficient as the Cerwin-Vegas.
Okay.
So they basically were halfway in between the previous 2 pairs we'd listened to. We did rule them out, but I think overall they did a good job.
I really like those C8s. I'm surprised we haven't sold them yet. We have almost sold them several times. And then I think it's a similar situation to this where like we listen to them and then there's something else and then that something else is what ends up being the winner. But the C8s are always in the mix.
They're in the, I think that's fair. In the very early days of our business, when we were running Radique just kind of as a hobby, we had a number of times the C6s in, so one model down, and we gave them our coveted blue asterisk in, I can't pronounce that word very well.
You just did.
Okay, I tried. In our internal tracking for our favorite sounding speaker for their price point and size. So the C6s we've always been very impressed with. They're smaller. They're about that large.
I thought they're a little bit bigger because today we just sold some MX1s that were about that big. I feel like the C6s are like that, and then the C8s are like that still.
Okay, we can agree to disagree on that. I could be wrong. I've already been wrong
You're
at least
wrong,
twice.
And before we
just since we started filming this video, I've been wrong twice at least.
Before we were rolling, you were just wrong.
Oh,
wrong,
I've been wrong a lot today for sure.
It happens to the best of us.
It does.
Okay, so Cerwin-Vegas, were they still in first place after the Tannoys?
The Cerwin-Vega VS speakers were still solidly ensconced in first place.
Okay, we'd eliminated the JBLs at this point, so now really it's just two that are in the running.
Yes.
Okay, where did you go from there?
From there, we went to another pair of Canadian-made speakers from the much maligned brand Nuance. I'd love to do another video for you guys at some point.
Nuance has such a bad rap. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's a really interesting backstory, which I'd love to get into. But the bottom line is, I think a lot of their speakers are actually quite good.
Most of them have I don't know what Nuance speakers we've had that have not been good.
You're right. And when I'm saying good,
bookshelves, towers, subwoofers.
I feel like the build quality is unassailably strong for the ones we've had. You know, we've had them apart. We've looked at the drivers, heavy duty.
They're so heavy.
Yeah.
And the thickness of the cabinet, just the bezel on the woofers are, I don't even understand who could hate on these speakers.
Yes, there is a good reason why they have a bad reputation, but I don't think that reason has anything to do with the build quality. Anyway, like I said, we'll get back to that.
We've already gone so far. Okay,
sorry.
So we're going to do a whole different video titled Nuance Speakers.
We will.
Why do they get so much hate?
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting. These were the Star1Ss from Nuance. And the first few phrases from Kryptonite, I thought, wow, we have a new winner, because they were just so articulate and accurate and very, very musical. But as soon as the bass line hit, it's like, wow, they just disappeared. They were not nearly as much bass as the first three pairs of speakers we played.
Now, are these all like similar sized drivers? Are we talking like 6-inch?
If anything, the Nuances had a full 8-inch. Actually, I think all the ones we've been discussing had 8-inch woofers.
Okay.
And the cabinet size for the Nuances was quite large. But I would just say they're quite a bit less efficient as a speaker.
That is true.
And efficiency, it doesn't mean a speaker is good or bad because it's efficient or not. There are very high-end speakers that are very inefficient, and they just require a lot of power to drive them. So
I feel like I feel like that's inherently a bad thing. I want efficient speakers.
For a lot of applications, having efficient speakers is good. I'm just saying there are some of the world's best speakers that are highly inefficient, and you overcome that with providing them a lot of amplification. But for this particular application, he definitely wanted to play loud with his existing amplifier. So the nuances between their lack of efficiency relative to the first three pairs and their lack of bass, at least with the setup we were using them with, they were out of the running. But I would say that for someone that was looking for something different in their speaker, for example, a really articulate musical speaker to be played at modest volumes, they could have been a great option for someone wanting to listen to jazz or easy listening, or maybe even some orchestral music. But
how did they compare to the JBLs?
They were very different from the first three pairs. They were absolutely the most accurate. You could hear the different instruments quite clearly.
I don't like the seating.
But lacking in bass at the volume levels we were playing, and much less efficient.
Okay. All right, so they were out. JBL's, Nuance out, Cerwin-Vega, Tannoy still in.
Yes.
So at some point when I'm demoing speakers, I'm just like, all right, we're done. Like, let's go back to the first two.
That's a very good
Let's go
point.
back and forth and see between those two.
That's a very good point.
It could just keep going forever.
Yeah. We do have lots of speaker options. So we almost were done. In fact, I think that Chris came close to just pulling the trigger on the Cerwin-Vegas, but he had been looking at our ads before coming for his visit, and he wanted to listen to some PSBs. The last pair we listened to were some Canadian-made PSB 500s. They were probably the largest cabinet volume of the five pairs. Not much bigger, but probably about that tall and probably about that deep, if that gives you a bit of an idea.
It does.
We will be posting these model numbers in the description, so you'll be able to look up the exact specs. When they first started, they sounded most similar to the Nuance speakers. Very articulate, very clear, clean sound. But the difference is when the bass line kicked in, they did not disappear. As soon as the bass line kicked in, they were keeping right up there with the very, very best of these speakers so far, those Cerwin-Vegas. So they kind of combined the accuracy and articulateness of the Nuance speakers with the excellent bass response of those Cerwin-Vegas. So,
Well, time out.
yes.
Can I ask the positioning of these speakers in the speaker wall? Did that have anything to do with anything?
That's a very fair question, and depending on where speakers are positioned in our speaker wall, that can definitely play a difference.
Something has to be low and something has to be high.
Yes. The biggest difference tends to be high frequency stuff, because high frequency is very linear. So they're like little laser beams shooting out of the tweeters, and if they're not aimed in the direction of the listener, or at least the general direction of the listener, it can be possible to really miss out on what they're putting out. But in this particular case, the highs from all 5 pairs were quite good. None of them were a problem. If they had been, it might have been worthwhile relocating speakers for the final test, like once we had it narrowed down to 2 pairs.
Yeah, I hate doing that.
Yeah, but I think that the PSBs were a clear enough winner. And we both felt the same way. I think Chris, I tried not to say how I felt about the speakers until Chris had a chance to express himself.
Sure, your big grin was very subtle.
Maybe.
Mark is very effusive.
I tried very hard not to color his perception of them with my own feelings until he had a chance to express himself on them. But I think we both agreed they were the best sounding speaker. And
That's not what I would have thought.
I'm not saying they were quite as efficient as the Cerwin-Vegas. So in the efficiency category, I would say they were less efficient than the Cerwin-Vegas and the JBLs, probably around the same as the Tannoy. So kind of in the middle of the pack for efficiency. And as I mentioned earlier, efficiency is not a factor that will make a speaker good or bad on its own. It's just one of the things to consider.
But in a vacuum, if you're comparing an inefficient pair of speakers and an efficient pair of speakers, the latter will almost always win, because it tricks you into thinking that they're louder at the same volume and they sound better.
I completely agree with that. That would be another excellent topic for us to delve into in more detail for a future episode.
Do we know what amp he had?
Yes, he is running a more modern Sony 100 watt per channel.
Okay.
Which, for those of you who are vintage fans, probably it's maybe the equivalent of a 35 or 40 watt per channel 70s amplifier. So, pretty good power, but not crazy,
100
overwhelming
watts
power.
is solid. It's comparable to the JVC that you guys were listening to.
Yes, except that one is a good 15 years older, so it's already a bit more conservatively rated.
Okay.
Yes. So Chris wound up being quite pleased with those PSBs.
Nice.
Of course, we have our perpetual trade back policy, which means that if Chris's needs change and he winds up having a larger location down the road, or just he's wanting to upgrade to a higher end speaker, that's always an option for him as well. It was fun. It was fun to share that experience. Chris was a great guy.
Yeah, he was really nice.
Yeah. And
I met him because I was here.
And he had an awesome beard. So I should mention
that's
that.
the first thing you said when you opened the door was...
It just struck me how nice and tidy
way.
it was. I know mine sometimes is quite messy. So.
All right. Well, shout out to PSB, because they're probably one of the top 3 speaker brands.
Canadian speaker brands, absolutely.
That we've sold the most of.
Yes. PSB and Paradigm are probably the 2 brands we sold the most of. And then the API family of speakers, which includes Energy,
What does
Athena,
API stand for?
Not sure off the top of my head. Energy, Athena, Mirage, Sinclair, and, it's going to really drive me nuts, Sound Dynamics. Those 5 brands were all owned by API. Unfortunately, it no longer is a Canadian company, but it was at the time they were produced.
My only beef with PSB is that they still use a lot of foam. A lot of their speakers are foam.
A lot of the ones we run into, we should clarify.
Fair. Yeah.
So yeah, we're dealing with vintage and used speakers. So often we're not seeing products that are produced in the last 5 or 10 years. Not nearly as often. We're seeing more products from 20 or 30 years ago.
And nothing wrong with foam. It's just you need to maintain them over time.
And to be fair, those Cerwin-Vegas definitely use foam as well.
Yeah, but they're a cool orange foam.
Yes, cool orange foam.
The ones he bought, the 500s, I believe those were rubber
surrounds. Those are rubber surrounds, so he won't need to worry about refoaming those,
That's
which
cool.
is good. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So this has been our testing of our microphones, as well as showing off this very delicate, expensive sign.
Our spiffy new sign.
I hate the word spiffy. I hate it so much.
I know you do.
Do you use it because you know I don't like it?
In part, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mark said, in addition to Mark telling me that I shouldn't sit there because it wasn't my most flattering angle, he also said, what else?
She did ask my opinion on that, by the way.
I don't think I did.
You absolutely did. You said,
look?
how do I look?
and then you just told me how I looked.
How dare I answer that question truthfully?
You added some color commentary that wasn't really necessary.
Apologies for
what
that.
else was I going to say? Oh, yes. Mark said to me today, which is something so insane, but it makes sense. He said,
it was very honest.
I'm in the mood to be annoying today. Did you say that?
I did say it.
What a
I'll
weird
stand by
thing
it.
to say.
I'll say this. I have a couple of brothers. One of them, shout out to Ian. He knows, he knew this was coming. Ian has always been, he's the youngest of 3 boys in our family. We also have a younger sister, Megan. But Ian has always been extremely good at teasing his siblings. And I like to think that everything I've learned about teasing people...
Us? You're strange.
Yes,
right,
teasing his siblings, including me. So everything I've learned about teasing people came from Ian. He's an expert.
Well, then my beef is with you, Ian.
I'm at best sort of a journeyman teaser, but he's a pro all the way.
You didn't say you're in the mood to tease people. You said annoy people.
Okay.
And
well,
I am people, and I was annoyed.
Okay.
And then you didn't like it when I was annoyed, even though that was your goal. But careful what you
No, I was fine with you being annoyed. It just... Anyway. So we will cut it there. Thank you so much for your attention. If you have not already done so, please like and subscribe. It means a lot for us to get your support that way, and it encourages us to make more content.
Yes.
And of course, feel free to make comments at the bottom of the video. We will try to reply quickly.
Yeah. I'm not the best at replying to messages, but know that I see them and that I appreciate them. And between Mark and I, oh, chicken soup.
Chicken noodle.
We still have time for that though, right?
Thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you.
Bye, world.